Glory to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to another episode of City of Desert. And once again, we are picking up with our reading from the first volume of the Philokalia, and in particular, the writings and the sayings of Evagrius of Pontus. And we are reading his sayings and his writings on asceticism and stillness. And if you're following along in the text, again, we are in volume 1 on page 33 at the very bottom of the page with paragraph number 8. Evagrius writes, "If you find yourself growing strongly attached to your cell, leave it. Do not cling to it. Be ruthless. Do everything possible to attain stillness and freedom from distraction, and struggle to live according to God's will, battling against invisible enemies. If you cannot attain stillness where you now live, consider living in exile and try to make up your mind to go. Be like an astute businessman, making stillness your criterion for testing the value of everything, and choose always what contributes to it." This is an amazing little saying, and it shows the psychological astuteness of Evagrius of Pontus, that he realizes that the human heart can become attached to anything. And even the smallest of things can become for us a substitute for our seeking God. We can become so attached to even the smallest things of this world that our focus becomes fixed upon them, and we fall into a kind of idolatry. And the surprising thing about this little saying is that Evagrius is telling those he's writing to that they are not even to become attached to their cell, their monastic cell. And we know that these cells of the monks were very austere, but Evagrius understands that one could become attached to the particular comforts that are found within them. Familiarity of place, closeness to other solitaries or other monks, closeness to water sources or food sources, uh, just a peacefulness of mind and stability, a sense of security in those things can lead to a kind of attachment to them. And one gets lost in the sense of comfort. And it breeds within the heart a kind of plateau within the spiritual life. One can grow lukewarm because one has learned how to exist within one setting. Even if it is austere, one can no longer be challenged by that and enter into a routine, not in the good sense of the word, but rather a routine where one is simply going through the motions, that one's ascetic life, as it were, becomes perfunctory. And so for a monk in particular, there would be a danger of this developing. And in a surprising way, Evagrius says, be ruthless. If even in this, even in the austerity of your cell, you grow comfortable, leave it, go somewhere else, and strike out, leaving behind even the smallest sense of comfort. And he says to those who are his readers, even to contemplate going into exile. That is, placing oneself in a different country where one does not know the terrain, does not know others, has no resource, as it were, to fall back on. If one were to find oneself in great need in regards to food or water, or one becomes ill, not to live in familiar surroundings, or even to live within a place where one is familiar with the language. There's a little video on YouTube called The Last Anchorite about Father Lazarus. And he comes to Egypt and becomes a monk, St. Anthony's Monastery, but more so becomes a solitary in the cave of St. Anthony. And at one point he describes the challenge of coming to a different country, a different culture, and not having the language to fall back on, even to communicate with others, that it forces an individual, as it were, to cling to God, to cling to prayer, and not to take that relationship for granted. And this is exactly what Evagrius is counseling, uh, to leave one's homeland, even, and to go to a place and to willingly put oneself in exile, away from all the comforts and stability and security that one has had in the past, all so that one might rely upon God alone. He says, be an astute businessman in this regard and make stillness your criterion for testing the value of everything. So, an astute businessman, we are to be as wise as the earthly minded in their earthly affairs. This draws the mind back to Jesus' teaching upon the sons of this world being wiser than the sons and daughters of light, that someone within the world can seek to protect his own welfare and well-being with greater wisdom than a son or daughter of light, a son or daughter of the kingdom seeks holiness and stillness and constancy of prayer, or seeks to protect what is most precious, that is one's virtue and the grace that God has given to one. And so Evagrius, in a similar way, is saying this has to be the one criterion by which you judge the value of everything. If where you are living, even if it is in the midst of the desert, has become too comfortable, too familiar, and you lose that inner stillness and become distracted by the familiar things around you, or other monks, or conversations that frequently take place, then take up yourself and move from there to that place of exile. The Son of Man had nowhere to lay his head. And this is what the monk is to imitate, to have no comforts, no home within this world. We are citizens of the kingdom of heaven. This is our country, if you will. And this is where our loyalties lie. And so the moment that we see the realities of the kingdom, the silence of prayer, the stillness of prayer becoming more and more absent, then we would exile ourselves in order then once again to return to that closeness with God. This becomes the criterion for us in every measure. For those of us within the world, it is, I think, similar that we are not to grow comfortable, even in a modest and simple lifestyle. We are always to be striving to enter by the narrow way. And so we set aside even those things that perhaps are legitimate within the eyes of the world, or even within the eyes of the church, in the sense of the austerity, the asceticism we embrace. If it has grown too comfortable, too familiar to us, that we should set it aside in order that the fervor for God that we have within our hearts would always burn hotly. And so let us pray today for the wisdom that Evagrius puts before us today, that we would make our one criterion by which we evaluate everything, that which draws us close to God, that allows that fire of the Spirit to burn hotly within our hearts. Thank you, and God bless you, and I look forward to seeing you soon.